So let's jump on in. Neicy DeShields-Moulton, based here in York, PA, is a retired computer hardware engineer with over 25 years of expertise in genealogy and family history research. Throughout her career, she has delivered engaging presentations at various organizations and educational institutions across South Central Pennsylvania and Maryland. A member of the African American Historical Society in Lancaster, Neicy also serves as a board member here at the York County History Center. She actively contributes to significant projects such as the Emancipation Across Generations initiative as a part of the Heritage Guide team, and collaborates with the Hampton Plantation on the Tracing Lives Through Slavery Engaging Hallowed Ground project. Neicy's objective is to cultivate interest in genealogy among both young individuals and adults, equipping them with necessary tools for researching their family histories. Her personal journey in genealogy has not only bolstered her confidence, but has also fostered a profound sense of empowerment and self-awareness. Neicy DeShields-Moulton has explored the Batty/Beatty and Spencer families of York and their link to the history of slavery, forced labor, and wealth at Hampton Plantation. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Neicy.
It is a mouthful. Hello, everyone. I have a lot of familiar faces here. Thank you for coming. Okay, I'll talk about this. The reason why I call this veiled chapters, because for so long we do not talk about slavery, enslavement, and plantation. So that means it's kind of a closed society that people don't talk about. So I want to go over and explain to you and show you what it's like to visit a plantation that we have right here, only 45 minutes away. And I didn't know that until I started on research and ended up at the plantation. And I'm like, oh my gosh, 45 minutes away from plantation. I've never been on one in my entire life. So I encourage you to go down to get a chance to check it out. I was actually down there this morning, so I'm kind of a little rushed a little bit because I had to go down there because I'm on a team working on some things down here at the plantation. So it's called Veiled Chapters of the Hampton Plantation. I'm revealing a secure narrative of family. This is the plantation. And as you can see, it was described as the showplace of America, one of the largest plantations there were in America and one of the richest. What this means, it was completed, it was like 24,000 square feet, so it was pretty large. In the 18th century, the property was originally part of the North Hampton. They call it Hampton Plantation now. A lot of people get confused with the plantation down in Virginia, but this was called Hampton Plantation as well. And it was purchased and sold by a relative of Lord Baltimore, and the heir sold it to Charles Ridgely in 1745, I think it was. The mansion was completed in 1790. He did not get to see the mansion completed. The second Ridgely did. And here were, let me say this right, here were the masters, or the owners of that plantation. It was quite a few generations. It was 6 generations of masters on this plantation. The first one was Colonel Ridgely here. He was the one that purchased the land. The first one that actually had the house built was Captain Charles Ridgely. And then he was the one that actually helped purchase all the land. And as they grew, he didn't have any children, so he left it to his nephew. His name was Charles Carnan. And he had to change his last name to Ridgely so they can keep the legacy going. And this is him here. He ended up being the governor of Maryland in, I think, 1818. And he purchased 25,000 acres of land. And that's how large this plantation was. So with that being said, the third one was John Carnan Ridgely, which was his son. Another Charles Ridgely, which was his son. And then his son, another John. And then his son, another John. So they kept the name going for sure. This kind of gives you an idea of how large the plantation is, or it was. Right here, you can see it all the way up by 83 and all the way up to 95, 25,000 acres. And this is Baltimore here, just to kind of give you a good idea. And if you take a look here and if I put them on top of each other, shows you how much. That was a lot of acreage. And this is a depiction of what the plantation actually looked like back in that day. There was the plantation, and right now there's a road that goes right through it. It's called Hampton Lane, so you have to cross the street to go to the rest of it. And over here was the overseer's house, and then the rest of it, they had horses and they had all kinds of things on the plantation as well. Governor Ridgely, he was the 15th governor, 1815 to 1818 of Maryland. He enslaved African Americans in 1864, and he had over 800 enslaved men and women and children. And that's a lot of people. Records show that he also had indentured servants, which were Irish and British on the plantation. Some were convicts, and some were not. And the convicts, they stayed a little longer, and then some that weren't were released earlier. And the Africans that were on that plantation were chattel. That means that they were their slaves for life. That were originally it was called Northampton. And then when the Ridgeleys took over, they changed the word to Hampton. The last 43 acres were designated by the National Historic Site by the Secretary of the Interior in 1948. The site opened in public in 1949 under the care of the Preservation of Maryland. Listed in the National Register of Historic Places in October 1979, it was acquired by the National Park Service, purchasing an additional 62 acres, and that's what it is now. It's still 62 acres. Enslavement at Hampton. So we can't talk about Hampton without talking about enslavement, because all their wealth came from the enslaved people, or they wouldn't have been as rich or be able to purchase the things that they actually had. The Ridgely family held an interest in ironworks, and that was their main source of income, was the ironworks. And mills, their complex centered around Hampton Manor, which served as the center of operations for the family's enterprise. And there were other family members that they were willed out to or given to as well. And it's David Ridgely, his family, White Marsh, and you see where that name comes from. They're actually related to the Ridgely family. And they had Henry Van Shoot Epson Farm, Harry Dorothy Gold Farm, Carrot Hall, we've heard that. James Howard, a teacher about that as well. They were all relatives of the Ridgely. While these family extensions will not be explored at this point, I won't go over them. We'll just pass over them and go to the next one, because they were all over the place, because they actually rented them out to, or gave them to, or and they inherited them, or they were willed to. Their business: furnaces and ironworks, grain mills, agriculture interests, orchards, livestock, and dairy products. They actually had a dairy farm way back in the 1800s on their plantation. And there's a whole list here. I won't read them all. So you kind of look at and take a look at it. But young children started working on the plantation at the age of 5 and 6. Elderly remained there until they could no longer work. But these are all the things that they did. And this is a look inside the house. When you go down there, it is a beautiful home, very beautiful. And they have a lot of original furniture and a bunch of other things. They have their pictures on the wall, whole 9 yards. And you can go to each one of these rooms open to the public. And the day I was there, I took a picture of this because they had a reenactor there. And she was an enslaved person in the kitchen, actually acting like she was cooking. And then this is also inside the house. And this was upstairs. And they were doing a reenactment right here. And then also, she was reenacting Polly Batty. Because we're going to talk about the Battys a little further down in this, but she was reenacting her. So it was really nice. If you go down there and have the event, you get to see this, the live characters. And this is outside. This is the ice house. And the enslaved actually dug this whole thing out, and they kept ice in there, stored all the ice in there. This is one of the gardening places that they have here. And this is the servants' quarter, and the servants' quarters was outside the house. because if it was hot, they wouldn't have the heat in the kitchen. And also, if it caught fire, it didn't burn the house down. Okay. And then here is an actual picture of an enslaved person standing near the slave quarters, right here. And I think that one of the families that I've ever met, they actually have photographs of their enslaved people. And here, this was the head butler, and his name is Thomas Brown. So if anybody here sees any names that might jump out to you, your ancestors may have came from that plantation as well. And then you have Nancy Davis. She was Nancy Brown Davis. She married David. And then you have two enslaved persons here where they are actually making apple juice and here in the apple tree. And here you have the two boys. And a lot of times they may be taking care of the kids. And also they work. At this age, they were actually working. And they would haul the corn, they would carry the pails, they would do whatever needed to be done on the plantation. And then here you have, I think this is Nathan Harris. He's actually an enslaved person as well. And he took care of the horses. They had thoroughbred horses and they would race their horses. And then up here you have an enslaved woman pushing a baby carriage right here. And then you have the family on the porch. You can see them back across the mile. And then you have another worker here. His name is John. I think it's John Pratt, Jim Pratt. And I don't know who that is right here. They kept very good records. A lot of documentation. That's how we can know who some of these people are. And this is just a depiction, not just showing all the glamorous side that's inside, but what happened outside, how they worked, how they cleared that whole area, how they actually built the mansion by hand. And and this is the overseer, that's actually John Ridgely. And then this is just one overseer seeing the enslaved person cut down things and working. And when you go down there, they have all kinds of markers and signs. And you get to read all these markers and signs. I won't read this. If you want to read over it quickly, you can. We talked about bondage. And they also have this side also in one of the enslaved quarters, because they still have the homes where the enslaved actually lived and the indentured. They still have those right there on the plantation as well. The ones that were wood, of course, they no longer exist, but the stone ones do still exist. And they talk about the two worlds. One that owned it, and the other that built it. And if you look here, this is the overseer's house, and these stone buildings are the enslaved quarters, as you can see right here. And you can walk through them, look at things. They have some things you can touch. They have a lot of markers there that you can read as well. And this was a little smaller. I think they added on to that later on in the 1800s. This was the actually the Ridges lived here until the mansion was actually built. And then this is the front porch of it. And I took two bus tours down there, and Cheryl actually took us around. She's the one that did the ethnographic study on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna let her tell you a little bit about it, and we'll watch it. That way I don't have to tell you about that. So watch Cheryl do what she has to say.
Here's the patient site. All of this contributing to the health of the district. So when we talk about the overseer's house, which is what this is, unfortunately, we can't go there. So let's just look at it, and I'm going to show you a couple of things about it. We know the names of the overseers. Those are the people who are basically the managing of the plantation. These enslavers are not out here doing any of the day-to-day oversight of the people that they're enslaving. That is in the hands of the overseers. We also know about overseers because they often sign what they call runaway slave ads. Instead of the slaveholder himself will see their names at the bottom of the ad. So this is, now I want you to look at a couple of things from the overseer's house. So the first thing you notice, this is summer, we can still see, it's called the view shed. We can still see the mansion, and the mansion can see the house. But somebody said to me, one overseer for all these people. Well, when you start to understand that the elevation of the land and the vantage point says to you that these are the things that I can see, I don't have to have a lot of people. I can manage you because I see what's going on all around me. That's what's happening here. All of these waysites, by the way, are going to be changed and updated as a result of the ethnographic study. So if you come here first, are the stated. So the Ridleys raised, among other things, thoroughbred horses. They're the people that bring horse racing to town. So that when you start to understand, not only are they important for their crops, you see their name in all of the fairs that they're ever winning for their fine sheep and their fine dogs. They're winning for that, but they also are bringing these magnificent horses, and the groomsmen who would have been in place are caring for them. And even a couple of the characters are still inside, but those are not. So, even by today's standards, even though this is the overseer's house, it's not a bad job to have. And if you're looking at it from the material vantage point here. But I want you, I'm a landscape person. I'm studying the landscape and the land because what I know is the historical record isn't going to have what I need. I know the land you're talking to. So again, look at the view that you have from here. Yeah. So this is the view. I've been up in the people take pictures, you can see across the county. Now the trees are come up. But you can see just great distance from the cooler. So now I want you to understand that this is what I call the landscape of place. So whenever you go someplace, dominance is in the landscape. And it's dictated by what's on the hill and what's not on the hill and what you can and cannot do. So the overseer would have been here. You have the horses, there would have been barns that have been destroyed because they put a housing development in over here. Somewhere down here would have been a racetrack down over here. Obviously right in this area here. So we know that horse racing, gambling, they don't want to talk about that, but you know, Pimlico, we'll talk about it more because we're going to keep some focus that they need. So this is the space where I need you to begin to think about how is it that so few people can enslave so many. So 1 is oversight, 2 is money, 3 is violence, always violence. They are iron workers. We know that we have receipts for them making collars. If you've seen those iron collars that people are locked on.
They have one in there.
There's all kinds of coercion. See, not so much here, because what they do at Hampton is a little different from what I see in other places. Hampton, as we know, encourages intermarriage. The people who are enslaved up there, they're marrying each other. And they have huge families. So these families are having what? Children. We have people who are having 8, 10, 12, 15, 20, 22 children. Now, in slavery, the condition of the child follows the condition of the mother.
Yep.
What does that mean? For the white slaveholder, it is a very toxic mix because now he's got slavery, sex, and profit, and no accountability for paternity. So now when you see people who are of mixed race, it's lots of times a white slaveholding father and a black mother, and the child by law is enslaved because the mother was enslaved. Yes?
Yes.
So that when we're looking at these things, we need to understand how these situations came to be. Make sense? So when we start to talk about, after we go through this part, we're gonna go over because they have 3 standing stone slave quarters here. And that is a tribute to the material that's been used. A lot of places I go, you can think of slavery like a crime scene. And you can think of historians as having wiped the evidence clean. So they get rid of the slave quarters on most of these places they're gone. And when you find them standing, it's a real interpretive treasure, because oftentimes they don't exist anymore.
And they're made of wood, right?
They're also made of wood, it's, termites and all these
Yeah.
other things that come because you have to, because lots of arson in the Black history, even though they don't talk about it as arson, you don't have it.
What do you think about that? That's just a small tour of the plantation when you go down there. And Charles Carney originally died, and he manumitted some of his enslaved. He manumitted 350 slaves, and one of the largest numbers of manumissions in history. Children under the age of 2 follow their mothers, just like Cheryl just said. And females between the ages of 25 and 45 were released, and the males were from 28 to 45. This did not end slavery at Hampton. The new owner, John Bridge, they purchased 62 more slaves on board, and a person in manumission, remaining enslaved, and their increase were free as they reached 25. Enslavement at Hampton, slave forced labor provided the backbone of the workforce on the plantation. Work and discipline were regulated by one overseer, and treatment varied depending on what plantation you were on. The Ridgely family enslaved people all the way back to 1747. And they used them to do the cleaning and the clearing so they can build all the buildings and everything that they were doing in the ironworks. The enslaved were sought after in a particular section in Africa because their known skills, agriculture, ironwork, architecture, and artisans. In Africa, a lot of them had already known how to do all these work, so they wanted specifically to certain parts of Africa to kidnap them and bring them here to do that work for them. The idea that Africa was undeveloped before colonization is a common myth. Africa had a rich and diverse range of societies, cultures, civilizations, advanced systems of governance, trade, agriculture, technology, long before Europeans colonized it. In the United States, slavery is never given credit for the economic viability the country enjoys today. If it had not been for the enslaved in this country would not have the welfare that they had forced free labor. This is a map of Africa, and it kind of tells you what Africa was good for. Crude oil, diamonds, gold, coffee, so on and so forth. And then this tells you which country went over there and took from the country. So you have France up here where the petroleum is, you have British over here where this is, and then in the 1950s, African countries gained their independence finally. But the represented the 13 European states, the United States of America, and the Ottoman Empire conversed on Berlin of an invitation of German Chancellor Otto, and divided Africa among themselves and did not invite any Africans to the meeting when they divided it up. The ethnographic team of Maryland with Maryland University and Towson University, they went ahead and they reconstructed, I think, the 6 families. It was the Batty family, the Cummings family, the Harris, and they started with the Batty family. So we'll talk a little bit more about that further in. Names and descriptions of enslaved forced labor. On some of the documents they found, they didn't find any last names, but they just, when they described them, this is how they described them. It was hard to figure out who was who because they would describe them as Black Sam, physical attributes, Yellow Sam, Black Joe, Cripple John, as A, young, old, little, racial descriptions, little, dark yellow, mulatto. And that's how they describe them. So you couldn't find the names of people that were actually on that plantation. That's how they were described in the documentation. And then as we go into the enslaved houses there, this is the difference between what you see is also there's even separation in slavery. On the left here, this is the Black enslaved home. This is their bed on the floor with a cot and a pillow, and this is where they kept warm. The indentured, which were the Irish, they had a bed, they had clothing, and this was their room. Like, so they show the difference between the two, and they talk about the two differences between the Black and white, even in slavery, and they were doing the same job. And she mentioned this one earlier about this collar. This is a punishment collar. This is actually one for a child. This is here. It goes around their neck to keep them from running or whatever trouble they may have gotten into. That goes on the neck. This is actual copy of their paperwork that the originally actually kept. And this is on for clothing and food. And what we see here is a handwritten advertisement of one of the enslaved that had ran away. And then it was posted in the paper and looked like this. And I believe this one's actually headed to Europe. You look right here, that they're looking for is a very black girl around 16 years of age, 5'4" inches tall, slender, and they said she was on her way to Peach Bottom. So she was on her way to York County from that plantation. And this is the Christmas list I saw when I was down there. The whole list has a whole list of children's names on it and gifts. And where you see it blank is where they did not give a kid a gift. And it was a form of punishment and control with this list of Christmas lists they had. And you can probably read that too. And the kids were often rented out as well. And this is another actual copy of some paperwork, and it's an inventory list. And this is what it actually says. This is what it reads: a true perfect inventory of all the things of good, chattel, which means people, and personal estate of Charles Bridget of Hampton, late of Baltimore, deceased. When he passed away, they had to go through his will and divide up the people. So if you look right here, you'll see right here all these names. And on this paper, you have names like Lappin, Thompson, Richardson, Batty, Ashburn, Cody, Anderson, and there's more Batties on this list, and they're all in York County. All the Batties on this list. They're actually called Beatty now. And if you look to the further right, this is how much they were worth. Right here. And this is the marker they have there. I was just told today, I was down there today, that they just upgraded a lot of the markers. They have a lot more information about individuals and people. So when I go back down the next time to actually take a tour, there'll be tons of new information. And if you look at this closely, you'll see names, and this was their ironwork sheet that they had here, people that work in the ironworks. And then you have Saul Batty, Sal Batty, Maria Batty, Louisa Batty, Bill Spencer, Rebecca Spencer, and Bill Goodman on this list, and you see a price list next to them as well. So if they're sold or given away or rented, that's how much they were worth. George Batty in 1775. I'll talk to him a little bit since we talked about Batty. George and Esther first appeared on the records. When they did the study, this was the first two names that popped out to them that they were working on for the Batty family, or I'll say Beatty family. They had 6 children on that plantation. The work of the family contributed to enormous wealth enjoyed by generations of the Ridgely family. George, at the age of 54, was too old to qualify for manumission, so he was basically left behind. Wife was behind, kids were behind. He had to stay. Most of the Batty family were bequeathed by James Howard. James Howard actually had a lot of the slaves as well, because he was a relative. One of them married, I think, his daughter. And including Ephraim, Polly, Sal, James, and Sam. There's a possibility that James and Ephraim were twins. George continued living in slavery with his younger children after his wife was manumitted. Esther was manumitted at the age of 41 with her 1-year-old granddaughter. Ephraim was the eldest son. He reunited after his own emancipation 10 years later with his father. But he didn't get to see his father until 10 years later. George Batty, which was Beatty, he worked in the furnace. It was one of the worst jobs that you could actually have on that plantation. A lot of people died, a lot of people got injured, and he did that from the time he hit the plantation until he became an old man working. And this is a depiction of what it looked like. And this was actually located near Parkson, Maryland, at Gunpowder. This is called Gunpowder Forge. So at 5.5 miles from the Pennsylvania border. So that's why a lot of them, when they would work there, they would actually escape. And then not only that, there was a railroad, or I think the northeast or north-south railroad there, that they would jump on. They have a real underground railroad there. But this is, it is one of the worst. And this is a manumission secret. What this says here is George Batty. He was manumitted in 1840. And he was with James Howard at the time. Because him and his wife they were not on the same plantation. He was on the James Howard plantation, and the wife was on the Richmond plantation. How they make too many kids. and then this is Hetty Batty, which is Esther. She was manumitted first in 1830. And she was free. And these are actual documents that actually got from the plantation. And this is Ephraim Batty, when he was actually manumitted from the plantation as well. And manumission is free to anybody. And then this was Louisa Batty, when she was manumitted from James Howard as well. And then we have Rebecca Spencer, when she was manumitted, and they actually ended up in Peach Bottom as well. Manumitted surname. So if you see a name on this list that you might recognize some of you here, we know. So take a look at some of the names. Batty, Cummings, Johnson, Lee, Wick, Brown, Smith, Anderson. And I had asked them, I said, how come no one has the original name? And they said they had no idea. Not one of their enslaved their last name. I thought that was quite interesting to see that. Austin and Spencer, they came from the plantation. And we're not going to exempt York County because York County had enslavement as well. Just to let you know. And if you want to read about it, it's here. John Gibson wrote the book. And I thought it was quite interesting. I was looking down here and it says here, F.A. Batty, publisher. But yeah, they talked about slavery and what counties had how many enslaved people. I think Dover was the only one at this time back in 1780 that did not have any enslaved people on their farms. So who was George Batty? George Batty was Peach Bottom, York County. He is my fourth great grandfather. And that's who he is. And I am a descendant of George Batty from that plantation. I had the chance to touch the pig iron that he actually made. They said because he was the one that ran it all the time, he actually probably made the iron. And they called it pig iron. So they allowed me to go behind the glass and go ahead and touch it and feel it. It's over a century old. It's really, really old. He moved to Pennsylvania. When the Battys and the Spencers gained their freedom or escaped, they lived in southern York County. Peach Bottom is called Fair. Battys and Spencers married one another. And John Batty married Nancy Spencer, and that would be my grandfather. I guess it'd be third. They all settled in Peach Bottom. They were all known for the Underground Railroad, where they were actually located down by the water there. And my third great grandfather, which was a Dorsey, his name was Lewis Washington Dorsey. He was the conductor on the Underground Railroad. And he lived down in Peach Bottom as well. We were right down by the water. And here's proof that he was the conductor. And it's actually in his obituary that was in the paper. He also was a Civil War veteran, and he was also a Mason, and he was also a conductor on the Underground Railroad. So our people had done something, and he was right down by the water. And as people read about it, I'll call them freedom seekers, were looking for their freedom and running. He was actually right by the river to make sure these people got to freedom. And when you talk about twins still in the family, we're still having twins. These are two sets, not the same people, two sets of different twins of my cousins. And then there was like 3 sets of boys that we actually have as well. And we're still having twins. That can still show even back in slavery, having twins back in slavery, and we're still having twins now. These are just cousins. And this is the pedigree chart. And what this pedigree chart shows you is how I am descended from these people. And we start with me here, and then it goes back line like this. And that's George and Hetty Batty right here. And then John Batty is my grandfather, and he had a female child, so mine goes back to a female, not a male, basically. And then it brings it back up to me. That's my pedigree chart. And it took me almost 20 years to get all this, to find out. And I hit a roadblock, really, not until they did the epigraphic study, is when I finally found out where George was. I had all his information. And this is the software I use. And I keep it all organized in the software here. And what it does, it shows me George Batty, Esther, and then all the children. And then, as you can see here, John right here, this would be my next one, is my grandfather. And he was married to Nancy Spencer. And then he had a daughter, Patty Cassandra Catherine Batty. You can see me trying to find her when I was trying to find her. She used every one of those names. And she married a Murray. And Patty Cassandra Batty did. And then she had a son. His name was Randolph Murray. That's my great-grandfather. And this is my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, Thomas Randolph Murray, and Elizabeth Stewart, and she's from Lancaster County. And then they had a son, and then they had a son. I'm not going to go through all of that. And then DNA connections. After I did all of that, I'm like, okay, what else can I find out? So I did a DNA test, well, several DNA tests. Okay. And as you can see here, look at the names are up here. And I said, well, I wonder if I'm related to any of the Ridgely family. So I went through my whole DNA set and I checked to see who was related to the Ridgely family through my DNA test. And I am a Ridgely, as you can see right here. Several people. And then I said, well, let me see if any of my other relatives are actually Ridgely as well. So I tested a couple of other people. But in the meantime, this is my ethnicity. If you can see this right here. And if you look here, I'm 32% Caucasian. That kind of tells you right there, though, I could be possibly Ridgely as well. And that's not a small percentage either. And then the rest of me is African. I'm 66% African. And it breaks it down. And then I'm 32% there. And the majority of it is Irish. And then some indigenous and some Chinese and some other stuff. And then I took another test just to validate it, and it still comes up about the same numbers and the same amount of, there's 31% here, which is only a percent difference of European. So I said, well, let me check my sister and see if she's related. Well, as you can see, they're originally right there, or in her DNA matching. So definitely, Ridgely, Carnan, they're all in there. Dorothy. And then I went further and checked my cousin. I was double checking everything. My cousin Val, and she's actually originally also, and she comes up under the Carnans a little bit more. You can see here, that was Charles Carnan Ridgely. He was actually the nephew of Governor Ridgely. So they show up there. And I didn't have any men to test, so I mean, I have to check. So I said, well, let me try my cousin Harold, which we call Munn. And he's connected to the Ridgeleys as well. So that validates that I am a Ridgely as well. And then that he's 42% European. From what I read and from all the stuff that I've seen, it's the most African Americans in the United States are at least 80% European. I said that wrong. Not 87%, but 80% of them have European in them. And this is basically proof. Family names on the plantation as well. We had George Batty and Esther Spencer. They were on the Adam Walker's plantation. Becky Brown, Henry Cummings. There was some Cromwell, and I do know some Cromwell. And there was some Hawkins. They were on John Ridgely's plantation. Nathan Harris, the Howard, Kitty, and they had the name Sheridan on that plantation and Too Good. So take a look at those names, if any of those names are familiar names. So in the conclusion, because I only have 45 minutes, it won't take that long. I'll read it. I wrote this up myself, And I wrote up, it says, as the curtains rise, our collective history is unveiled, revealing the truth of American heritage. For too long, aspects of our family story have been shrouded by obscurity, but now the truth emerges. Our intertwined ancestry woven into the very fabric of this nation's narrative. The undeniable connection between my lineage and the wealth of this country comes into focus. America's prosperity has, in part, relied on the free labor of its African-American citizens, a foundation of truth that cannot be ignored. Contemplating an America without the invaluable contributions of African-Americans forces us to grapple with the alternative reality, one where the landscape of progress and prosperity would be drastically altered. My ancestors' resilience, innovation, and labor have shaped the nation's identity and trajectory. Their story is an integral part of the American narrative, one that cannot be omitted or understand. Collective effort for colleges, research teams, institutions like Hampton Plantation in America are revealing intricate truths, finally. The dedication to the pursuit is commendable and vital to ensuring the comprehensive telling of our collective history, and these truths are no longer hidden, so that's why I call it failed chapters. They're no longer being hidden. Thank goodness for all these institutions that are actually finally doing the studies and finding out who these people were. And it's American history, it's not just African-American history. Because I find when I'm doing my history, mine's intertwined just like everybody else. I'm up to over maybe 150 patriots, I'll say, of war. The most that I have for Civil War and World War II, I have over about 80 to serve in those wars alone. And the African Americans at that time didn't have to serve at all, but they did. And I have some plaques up here where I thought when I was doing this, in fact, when Obama was president, he was the first Black president, and then we had first Black colored troops. I thought it'd be a good idea if I can get Obama to send me something and sign it, and he did. So I have these up front. I have more than just these, I have plenty more. And I have the books up front here for anybody to see as well. And so I'll talk about it. It's almost over. Yeah, study. Showing her team traced my ancestry from the Hampton Plantation to me, reaching out to Tim Hilton, and he's a member of the African American Historical Society. Their contact led to discovering the origins of my paternal family line in America, and me closing their descendants that they were looking for. While my DNA test offers insight into potential African origins, it's just a merely piece of the puzzle. Being of African descent, grappling with the absence of my identity, because I had no idea who I was, where I came from, what was I, none. And origin has been a long-standing challenge, and it has been. I've been doing this for over 25 years to figure out who am I, where did I come from. This discovery signifies a new beginning and a starting point to the journey to unveil the full scope of our ancestral heritage. Now I'm unwavering in my determination to uncover the stories of my remaining ancestors and weave together the entirety of my beginning. So hopefully I can get there. And before I let you go, I'll let Cheryl actually explain to you real quickly that, how they did the ethnographic study.
We were first hired to trace the lives of about 300 people who were given their freedom in the will of Governor Charles Conn Richmond. That was the scope of the research we were asked to do, and we were asked to look in Towson, in Sandy Bottom, and in Lutherville. We very quickly realized, however, that if we stayed with that protocol, that we would miss several hundred other people who had been held in slavery before 1829 and who were held in slavery after 1829, because the emancipation was not a general emancipation. It was a staggered or age-related emancipation that only freed about 100, between 70 and 100 people immediately between the ages of 25 and 45, and any child under 2 was able to leave with their parents. We began by tracing those lives, but in the past, understanding who people were and what they did, the research kept expanding, because as we asked more questions, well, who are these people? What were they doing? We found that we had to go back through the primary source record. I think anybody who does African American history has to return to the source, return to the account books and start all over because so many people have not interpreted them from a humanistic perspective, but more from an economic. You know, what's your value? What are you worth? Rather than who are you? What have you done? Who are you in the world? And so we tried to do that. And in the course of going back to the account books and perhaps seeing someone like Millie Sheridan, who is the dairy maid down here at the dairy, we begin to see the pounds and thousands of pounds of butter that are being made here. We're beginning to see the cream that's being produced here. We're beginning to see the kind of monetary effect that this labor is having. So when you come to Hampton, you are often given the impression that these very savvy people who've made great business moves have built this wealth. When you really begin to look at the people who are doing the work, when you go to the iron furnaces, when you look at the materials and implements and the cannon and the shot and all the ordnance that are being produced, let's say, for the American Revolution, you start to see the products of the labor, and these products are being sold and producing the wealth that we see manifested in the mansion. The mansion is built from the wealth from that iron furnace. It is the foundation for almost everything that we see. So when in being able to go back through the inventories, to read the names, to see who was where, because until these lists existed, that I don't think people had actually put people in their places where they were. So we began, I'm a landscape specialist. So we began by looking at the land. We began by saying, well, who is at the furnace? And we could take these names that we had, place them where we knew they were, begin to understand what their experiences would have been, begin to really be able to see, well, if you worked in a furnace, even if I don't have your knowledge, I know what has to happen in a furnace. If you're working in a quarry, because the stone that's goes for the, I think the Washington Monument down in Baltimore, that comes from the Ripley Stone. And so you have all of these agricultural, which you're seeing here, industrial, which would have been at the furnace and at the mills and at the quarries, and have domestic slavery, which would have been inside of them. And so these are all of the ways in which we've been able to trace the people that we are interested in and put them inside the labor that was defining at least their work life, if not their personal life. The other side of that is that we've been looking at these families and watching them intermarry and come together as a family. These are not a random group of people being held in slavery in Hampton. These are multiple generations of the same family. And I think that is a really important thing.
Yeah. And if you go down, you get to take those tours, talk to the down there. They tell the whole history of the Ridgely as well as the enslaved on their plantation. And they're working on a lot of wonderful things right now. They just got a $13.2 million grant from National Parks, and I'm instrumental in helping them decide how to spend it. I was getting it. I'm not getting it. Because they wanted descendant input on how it should be presented and how it should, how we speak and how we talk about them, and how to, encourage other people to come down and take a look. Because this is American history. And because my grandparents were enslaved doesn't determine who I am today. I think how I look at it is resilience. I look at it, my grandparents went through all that. There's nothing that I can't do. That's what I take from this. I have nothing against anybody, because this happened a long time ago. So that's what I get. So with that said, I have questions and answers if you want to, and I'll just play a small bit. You can see some of the family members that. So. Any questions?
I didn't see any bells. The ones we seen had bells on for the top.
Well, I can show all that. That would be a whole nother presentation. This is focusing mainly on the Hampton Plantation, because I talk about slavery in general. There's a lot of things that I can tell you that it wouldn't be that. So this is from the relatives.
I have a question for you, Neicy. So genealogy is fascinating, and I'd love to have our genealogy checked, but which ones of the programs would you say are the most authentic or the most believable or the most valuable.
When you say program, talk about like
Yes, if we were to have
our DNA.
yes, our DNA checked.
I would tell people if they're using Ancestry, really looking for relatives, so that has the most people, that's where you want to do it. Ancestry. If you want to know more about yourself, I would say 23andMe. And I've also done family tree DNA as well. And that one's great too, because it's, especially because the male, because they'll go back to you and your Y and your X, that they definitely need separate for those. Because what they give you now is what they call the autosomal test, which gives you both. So when you go online, it will give you your mother's side and your father's side. And
Okay.
Ancestry is finally catching up with
We
23andMe.
feel like that'll be private, that'll just be sent to us.
Yes.
The 23andMe?
23andMe, yes, and I tested most of my male cousins and brothers and sisters on 23andMe because not only does it give you that, it also gives you your haplogroup. It gives you your 23. I think Ancestry finally way now your chromosome, your painter as an example, and it tells you going back thousands of years what ethnicity your grandparents were. Either the female only gets one side, which would be the female side. That's the man. If you're with a brother, you get both sides. So you need to know the ethnicity of person was one back thousands of years. Yes.
Thank you. This presentation was phenomenal. I mean, it's really thought-provoking. I wonder if you have any advice for any of us who are thinking about doing some of this genealogy work, how to approach the conversations with elder members of your family.
Oh, that was fun.
And some of them don't necessarily want to revisit parts of this that are difficult history. So if you could just give some pointers on how to engage in that conversation.
It's very difficult, especially with the DNA test. And thanks to my cousin over there, she got her daughter, because my uncle would not test when you have an example. And she said, just go ahead and do it with your grandmother. But you have to keep pushing. I kept talking to my grandmother, and she wouldn't tell me anything. Nothing. So I thought to do it myself. And then I found out so much more just by doing it myself. I talked to some other relatives, and I have a cousin alive today that's 106 right now, and she can't tell me anything. She said because her mom, at the time, and her brother, they were both enslaved, and the brother was taken and sold somewhere, and her mom just never recouped from that, and they never talked about slavery. Never. I almost feel like personally that because of slavery, it has changed our DNA. There's so much pain, so much hurt, and so much things that happen inside of us from all that stuff that happened to people. So that's how I feel. But I do say keep pushing, because one day they may just open. I think the best thing might be to take some things and put it in front of them and ask questions, and then they just start kind of rattling on. Like if you have that happen, they would just start talking, and we have something, or like they have pictures, give them pull the pictures out. Who is this? Who is that? And then they just tell us who. And if they don't know, they say they don't know. That's not always true either. But my grandmother always said they didn't know. And she knows it. And I'll be honest, the reason why she didn't say it because her mom and her dad were cousins when they got married. But that happened back then. And I have the actual marriage license where it actually says on their cousins. And that's why she didn't talk, because it could be something simple, or it could be something simple, something else. And I do a presentation on genealogy 101, but it tell you how to start from scratch, and where to go, what to do, how to get, what DNA test to take, and I do a presentation on DNA as well, so you want to understand the DNA process, because I've been through all of that as well. Any other questions? Yeah.
So you talked about enslaved would be emancipated at age 45.
Yeah.
So what happens when they're older than that and they can't work? What?
They just don't work, and they're just there. They don't.
So they would keep them there until they die.
Until they die, yeah. Unless they get lucky and get emancipated or manually. Yeah, because that my grandfather actually got. They're not sure how he got his manumission papers, the ethnographic study, but as you can see, I added up to his manumission papers.
Is there a burial area down there for the slaves that?
I asked them that there's only one person buried down there at the Bridges Plantation, and it's Neicy By the way, she stayed there until her death. She never married, she married, he was on a different plantation, and she never had any children. And her mother was my great cousin. Her mother was Batty and Nancy Davis, and there's a picture of her on the website with a little white child leaning on her. She took care of the kid. On that picture, if you go to their website, that's my great cousin. Okay. And they can't tell me where they are. They could be anywhere, but what I was told today when I was down is that a lot of the descendants from the plantation moved to East Baltimore. And a lot of them live there, and I haven't been there yet. I actually told them today I said, look, like I have to go to East Baltimore. That's where a lot of them live now.
Do you have any other upcoming talks that might be of interest?
March 24th, I have one, but they asked for the same presentation I'm doing now in Lancaster at the Trinity Church. And then on April 5th and 6th, the Outdoors College is doing a symposium. I'm part of the symposium. It's on the Hampton Plantation as well. But it's a 2-day event, and you get to tour the second day, you get to tour the plantation, and then there's something new that they're offering out called the Freedom Trail. And you'll get to be able to walk the Freedom Trail as well. And that has to do with East Baltimore and the descendants from the plantation as well. And when I was down there this morning, there were 3 descendants. There was me and 2 other people. And the National Park was there and a bunch of people from DCI. I haven't liked who they were, but we were talking about all this and getting our input again on how to proceed with this, what they're putting in place. They're actually getting ready to put handicap things there, more bathrooms are fixing up, so all that money is going to do all that kind of stuff. Get people to come down. They have things for kids, they have tours for kids, and all kind of programs down there as well. And educational programs, having kids understand the plantation and the people on it. In the front there's Warner Batty. He's the only one that kept the original spelling of the last name. Everybody else would be Beatty, Beatty, or Beatty, Bodie. But he's the only one that kept it. I didn't have a whole lot of pictures. I don't want to take up too much time because there could be a whole nother session.